Hello everyone, I am back with a new review of the third studio album by Norwegian electronic musician Amethystium, whose real name is Øystein Ramfjord. This album is titled Evermind, and it was released on October 5th, 2004. So this is the third album in sort of a trilogy of albums that he created in his earlier days. That's sort of what are considered the Dragonfly trilogy, as the dragonflies use the motif in the album art predominantly, and he sort of classified these three albums as being part of one huge story. And this is sort of the closing of that era or of that chapter. This is a very sort of interesting transitional record for him in his career, as there's a bridge between his older, earlier music, which was very synth heavy and was a little bit more, I don't want to say edgy, but it was definitely a little bit more boundary pushing in terms of being at times super sweet and glossy and at other times being very dark and brooding, and moving into a direction that is a little bit more on the strings and is a little bit more melodic and also lusher in sound. I think the production sort of changes just a little bit in terms of the layering of synthesizers that he uses. The beats are slowly changing. I would say it's a maturation step. However, I do think there was something special about his first two albums that had this stripped back feel but was very direct and very inaccessible. Now that's not to say that these albums later on are not inaccessible as well. He's getting as ethereal as ever on these works, but they're just different. I don't know if it's necessarily a good or bad transition. I mean, it's just moving towards a newer sound. He can't do the same thing over and over again. He can't make his first CD, Odinata, over and over again. Now, I have reviewed his first two albums, Odinata and Aphelion, on this channel, so make sure, any Amethystium fans out there, check out my links in the description for those two reviews. So now I'm here at his third record. I've been listening to his album sort of sequentially, and this album, I remember, actually really grabbed me. The conceptual arc of this album is, I think, a little harder to grasp. You know, Aphelion, it was like this story of darkness to light, and you had the album art, which was like in a forest, and I sort of got into this sort of story arc because of it. And Odinata was a little bit more harder to discern, but I feel like this album, the album artwork, it doesn't really give you very much. You're sort of left to just concoct and to construct these vast soundscapes in your own imagination, as of course you always are with this music, but definitely on this album. The song titles, they're getting even more aloof and intriguing. Opening up, we have this very beautiful, angelic, sweeping song named Arcus. This song almost brought tears to my eyes, and it's really hard for music to do that for me, just because of the way it breaks out and breaks through into something so epic and triumphant. I definitely feel as though this song fits, you know, a storm and then the clouds breaking after the storm. And also it feels very much like a flying song, like a song that you listen to as you're soaring like an eagle through the mountains. I definitely get that vibe, especially towards the end where it breaks out. The traditional flute comes in that he uses throughout his music, and it has just that sweeping synth line that is so soul-achingly beautiful and epic. And when we kind of descend down after this song into a murkier part of the album where it's all very much more, as the next song would say, into the twilight, it's very much more about the between light and dark. This song flirts on the edge of it, and it's actually still quite playful. The playful synths that come in are a little erratic at points, and so it's not my favorite because of this. It's a good rhythm, though. The song carries this rhythm out very beautifully, and you really do feel the crepuscular nature of the song. You know, twilight, the dark things coming out and saying goodbye and bittersweet to the day, because when we come into Shadowlands, boy, does this song get very dark and brooding. And this song is a perfect example of, I think, a direction that he doesn't go so often in his music, but was so worth the journey, because the journey can't always be sunny. It has to go in and out of darker moments. And this is a beautiful blend into a very, I don't want to use the word depressing, because this song is not depressing. It's eerie and it's engrossing. It's just as engrossing as the more sunnier melodies that he concocts. There's some really beautiful reverb going on that really swells you around in this oral atmosphere, and you really do feel like you've passed into something very unfamiliar, very eerie, very different, and you kind of know you don't want to spend too much time there, so there's this anxiety that catches up to you, that catches up to the rhythms. And he touches on this in songs on Aphelion and Odonata, but this is a full song devoted to this. Break of Dawn is the breaking of all of that anxiety, and he starts out very minimal. He starts out just adding in some nice atmospheric ambient sounds, as he does so brilliantly. The ambient elements of his music are amazing. Although this album and his music never gets straight up ambient, there's always that imbued soundscape of, field recordings that just amp up the sort of emotion. And then the song like Daybreak just comes all over you all at once. And there are some beautiful, beautiful melancholic synth lines that sort of they get you very nostalgic for something you think you've experienced, maybe because this is sort of the third in the trilogy of these albums. You think back on his story arc and you feel like time has matured, and you feel like you may have matured. I mean, anyone who was around, like who was actually listening to these albums as they were coming out, I wish I had been privileged to do so, but I was quite young at the time. I would not have necessarily been into his music at the age when these were coming out for me, elementary school, but I could imagine you would feel this sort of all the emotions come over you at points in like Break of Dawn or Arcus, where it's this pivotal moment and the sweeping, beautiful synths are just carrying you away. So honestly, these are masterwork songs. I mean, I find very little to complain about. If there was one song that maybe I felt could be axed or maybe could have been a little stronger, it would be the middle song, Innocence. This song alludes to sort of Arcadian paradise, as the title might imply, and you definitely, get to more traditional, again, flute sounds, some very emboldening, some very airy synth work. But for me, this song feels like it's missing some sort of cohesive thematic motif. So it feels a little bit wandering and aimless, but it's still a beautiful song. These songs, some of them just don't arrest your attention as much. Now, I can't believe I've gone through this review so far without mentioning the female vocalist who is featured, which is a new thing on these records for him. This is his first time featuring, I forget her name, and I was trying to look it up. But he features a female vocalist on the songs Arcus and Fable, and I believe it's just those two. And I couldn't go any further with this review without giving a shout out to the blend of the very kind of yearning ethereal vocals from this female vocalist who doesn't really sing lyrics most of the time. It's sort of just more vocalizations to match the melody line, but it's definitely an added extra ambience to this album that creates this emotional weight to it. Satori, we start out with some very nice ambient like clicking and sort of it starts out with all this potential and very few little small sounds, similar to how Arcus opens up with this ambient, very close to the microphone sort of opening. Now, Satori means innocence in Japanese, so we're coming from another Zen Buddhism inspired theme here, something that he visited on a song called Shibumi on Aphelion. And this song is just about ecstasy. I really don't see it as about anything other than pure Arcadian ecstasy. The melody line, the triumphant nature of it, the celebratory nature of it, the way it declares itself, it's declaring heaven basically, and that's how I see this song to be. And the beautiful way the track weaves in and out of the melody lines is just it's so you have to listen to it. It's hard to describe this kind of music. Like I said, there's no lyrics, so I do my best to sort of translate this music into some sort of I'm not an electronic music nerd. I don't know how all of these sounds are created beyond just like, well, there's a keyboard and there's synths and there's backing beats and rhythms and then ambient sounds, but it's just a beautiful beautiful blend of all of these things coming together. And I think it does a little bit better what Innocence was trying to do, which is create a little bit more of a memorable melody line. And then we transition beautifully into Barefoot by this very sort of clockwork sort of sound that sort of it's like a metronome keeping the time as we move into Barefoot. And Barefoot is, in my view, and understanding this theme of this story, is basically when you're leaving the confines of the city, the citadel, because I do think that Satori and Innocence feel a bit like, imagine like Minas Tirith from Lord of the Rings, you know, something very like grand and this, you know, sweeping, pristine white marble halls and this elven city. And then you're adventuring out into the wild again. So the latter half of this record, it's a bit more about searching for something. And so you're trekking out on your own, and so the song carries that sort of trepidation with it in the melody and in the a little bit less jubilant but still very propelling rhythm. And it blends beautifully into one of the highlight songs on this album, which is Reverie, which is literally, as the song title describes, a blissful moment of serenity in nature. And you definitely have a lot of deeper synths propelling you in this song. It's very synesthetic, I guess is the right way to put it. I'm not sure. But you really feel as though you're in a dream state because it slows everything down, and yet the rhythm is always there. Very, very beautifully done. If I had to recommend one song on this record, I would recommend Reverie. I love how it breaks down into just some like very nice, artful piano. This is also one of the first times he's really just including just straight up piano into his song, something that he does a lot more on his next record from 2008, which I will review next, called Isablis. And I think this song is a beautiful precursor song to that album because he's doing some things that he starts to do a lot more on. But I think he does it really well on this song. It's a beautiful, blissful moment before we go to the most mournful song on this record, which is Lost. Again, like the title, this song feels lost. This song feels dejected. It feels like the aura of adventure has all waned away, and now you're lost in some dark, dark forest, and you have no clue where you are. The melody is very pained, and it's very aching. And a little, again, it's not necessarily trying to evoke the same sort of peaceful emotion. It's a little erratic on purpose so that you feel that anxiety all over you. And it's a bit more minimalistic too. There's not as much layering going on this track, and it's most effective because of that, I think. Though, like I said, melodically it's not as memorable as some of the other songs. It pales in comparison to Reverie, but I still think the song needs to be the way it is. It's part of a story. You know, not all stories are filled with blissful serenity. And so I think the way this sort of ties into the end of the trilogy is that with these last two songs, Fable and Imaginatio. Fable very much feels, and it is a beautiful rhythmic haunting track, don't get me wrong. I mean, there's a very beautiful choral line that's sort of carried through and then distorted throughout the melody that gives it a feeling of traveling again. There's definitely a feeling of traveling in his music. Like you're going fast through vistas. You're not just like cruising, you know, you're zooming in and out and flying and soaring, and this music will make you feel that way. And Fable definitely has that rainy ambiance, so you get this sort of dejected, sort of more melancholic sound. So you feel as though, okay, well, this person has been lost. Maybe have they been lost forever? Is this like about the end of their life? And this is sort of an ode to them. I feel as though the character of the dragonfly, you know, maybe has traveled through all of these lands and gone through all of the stage and has matured and has now found a resting place. And maybe this is sort of like a more hymnal kind of eulogy type track. I don't know. I'm kind of pulling at straws here. I'd be interested in the comments if anyone has any thoughts on this. But Fable's more hymn-like melody feels a little bit like a eulogy, and it feels a little bit like a credit song. It's very, very beautiful. Amidst the rain, there's light. Amidst the darkness, there's hope. You get these feelings from the melody line and from the propulsing rhythm of this song. And then finally, we have Imaginatio. This song almost feels a little bit divorced from the rest of the story, and there's this really beautiful grinding guitar melody that just propels itself into something quite epic, and something that's quite different and unique from the rest of his story. It's sort of like a one-song emblematic symbol of the mind of Amethystium, or of life itself, imagination, as the song title comes from. And it ends the album on a very lofty note, I will say that for sure. A lot of his albums end that way, and I think it's important to end on a triumphant note, but also a mysterious one. And so it brings the light back, but also the urge to seek and explore. Overall, I think it's a very good bookend to this chapter and to this trilogy as well. Evermind isn't my favorite Amethystium record. I'd say Aphelion probably is, but it's second place. It's a beautiful record and it feels very pristine and it feels very well packaged. You can definitely tell that he's matured and that he's getting better at certain things. And although maybe there is a little bit less play and a little bit less experimentation, a little bit less of a DIY feel. This feels a little bit more like a polished product, especially since he's brought in other vocalists now and he's using other instruments. You can sense that he's growing up. But there's a sense of loss of innocence, even though this album is all about innocence to some extent. This album is about growing up. It's an album about puberty to some extent in terms of that beautiful childlike wonderment you have when you're young and then growing up into the world and seeing how messed up it is and trying to hold on to all of those memories of something so beautiful and hopefully taking it with you as you grow up into whatever comes next. I highly recommend this. And again, to Amethystium fans in general, thank you for checking this video out. I hope you enjoyed it. A lot of my viewers probably are not familiar with Amethystium. He's one of the least known artists that I'm covering currently on this channel, but there's a reason I'm doing that. I wanted to do someone who is very independent amongst all the other pop acts that I do that are very well known. So I'm still going to go through and do his latest 2 records, Isiblis and Transience. So stick around for those 2 reviews coming. And to anyone who's on the fence about listening to his music, if you know artists like Enigma, if you know artists like even Enya to some extent, or, you know, Delirium 2002, any of these other new age acts, and also anyone who just likes electronic music. If you like Future Sound of London, if you like I Am I, Who Am I would highly recommend you check out Amethystium because there's a lot of electronic backbone to all of us, and it's electronic music. So I think you would like what you hear. And so I hope I can turn some people onto his music. It's very underrated. Thank you guys all again so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this review. I hope you all have a wonderful day. Peace, love, and light. Bye.